absolutely not the case. I think it is so important to bear in mind that, being able to do so live shows to others, hey, I can do this and so can you. There's an educational aspect to learning live. You're spending a lot of time closer to folks who maybe not be that experienced developers. And there's one more thing that I think that is super important for this, especially those of us who have a bit more experience, and that is that it helps demystify this phenomenon that I found that senior developers especially have all the answers. Have we ever felt that way? Like, feel free to wave if you do, because I feel this way a lot of the time, where there's this myth that, especially as we're learning to code, that we look at a senior developer and we say like, they must have all the answers and they never need to Google anything. And that's not the case. And being able to code live gives us no option. It removes all possibility for perfection and just says, you know what, I'm gonna make mistakes, and that's totally fine. So before I start going into some tips and tricks for doing coding live streaming, I want to answer a question. And that question is, do I need high-end equipment and skills to be able to do coding live streaming? And to that, I want to say, absolutely not. Now, I realize I'm a hypocrite. I'm here standing in front of you with this very fancy microphone. But let me tell you, my camera, it's not a DSLR. It's not some fancy camera. It's literally just, I'm using my phone as a webcam. Simple as that. I'm not a super high-end professional, and that's totally fine. And that's totally fine, because it's about the content. It's about the person. It's about having a good time. It's not if you're going to start up front by spending thousands of euros or dollars or zloty on equipment, you're going to be, you're going to be stuck trying to solve the problem from the wrong angle. So now then comes the question, what kind of content can I live stream? And that's a valid question. And in order to answer that, I'm going to throw out some ideas as well as what I've been doing to do coding while live streaming. And for example, things you can do might not even be related to coding itself. Doing things like reaching out to folks and doing interviews with them, having panel discussions with folks, doing things like just live coding while you say, I don't know, do your homework or something, doing some live coding while you work on an open source project, while you do a tutorial. Ooh, yeah. Live coding while doing an active tutorial. This is something I do quite often, and it's a lot of fun, and it's valuable too. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I was doing at my previous job at a company called CodeC. And just to give you a little bit of background of this company I was working at, CodeC is building some tools for facilitating user cooperation and collaboration on complex code bases, right? So as DevRel, I came in and I took a look at the website, and I was thinking about the tools and all that, and I kind of stuck to the word onboarding, right? So one of CodeC's tools really has to do with helping folks onboard onto complex code bases for the first time. So what did I do? Last year, I came up with a weekly show that went live on live streaming called Let's Onboard Ramón. So every week I would bring onto the show the maintainer of an open source project, and without ever having looked at the code before, they were going to show me how to code for it. Like, they were going to navigate, I was going to drive, and by the end of the session, I was going to have a pull request ready to be able to contribute to their project. And that was sort of like my overarching goal for that. And it was fantastic. Honestly, folks, this was some of my favorite work I've ever done. There you can see a screenshot from it. There's a YouTube link if you're interested. The recording is still live. And so I would come on. Of course, it's onboarding, and I have a tendency to like props. So I wore a sailor outfit so that they could onboard me onto their code base. And it was great. Like, I had folks from, I think every week I had somebody from a different continent around the world. It was spectacular. And I coded in stuff that I've never touched before. I did stuff like Go. I'd never touched Go before. I did some vanilla JavaScript. I did some Python. I did some TypeScript. Again, all without prior looking at the code. And it was bumpy, and it was, messy, and it was totally fine. And everybody had a good time. And you might be wondering, okay, but why? What do the maintainers have to get out of this? And what do you, not only as a live streamer, but as a company, have to get out of this? And I think there's a couple of points here that I think are important. Remember, we're members of various intersecting communities. So even though I spend a lot of time in certain tech communities, the maintainer of this project is probably this part of a wholly different community. The tech world is very large. So not only does it help spread awareness of our tools, but it's also a good exposure for the project's communities to be able to come in and shine and be like, hey, we're inviting folks. We're looking for contributors. And this is a bit more selfish, but it's a good opportunity to meet new people and make friends. I'm still keeping in touch with these folks. It's absolutely wonderful. So if you want to do something like this and bring on guests onto your live stream, I actually prepared a set of guidelines that I send out to every guest prior to the show, and just be like, hey, here it is. It's open source. It belongs to Codecy, but it's still open source. And this kind of goes into things like, what streaming platform are we going to use? What is the expected behavior of you? Having something like a code of conduct is super important for us to be able to show that we want to have an inclusive and safe community. What the timing looks like, what the situation with the video on demand or VOD is, what does moderation look like? How do we make the guest feel safe? And of course, assure them of comfort and time. How important, because they're taking the time out of their day to come on and goof off with me on the internet online. It's super fun, but you also want to make sure that everybody's safe and comfortable. So when it comes to that, let's talk about scheduling. Scheduling live streams sounds complicated, and it's really not, because it's all about timing. Now, one rule of thumb that I found to be really effective is to be consistent. So what you can do, for example, this is what you're looking at here is Twitch, which is a platform for doing live streaming. And of course, not only for video games, but for talk shows or for all kinds of other events, including coding streams. And what you can do is set up a calendar there that say like, hey, every Thursday we're going to be live at this time, and we're going to be doing some open source coding. There's a URL there. You can put in your username for that and then have a go at it. What's cool about this is that when folks come and look at your schedule, they can actually download a Google Calendar or some kind of calendar that they can then import into the calendar, and then they'll not only get a notification being like, hey, Ramon is going live, but it also, it gives them something to expect. So if you want to grow an audience and, build a community around that, I find that having that consistency is really important. And when folks look at it, they go like, aha, it's Thursday. It's time for coding. Let's talk about announcement graphics. So when especially if you're prevalent on social, if you have a prevalence on social media, being able to announce that you've got a live stream coming with a large, distinct graphic is something that I find really important to be able to do that. Again, consistency being critical here. So you have a large graphic with the pictures of the people being like, hey, this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing some GraphQL, some Contentful, some Gatsby. I'm going to be hosting it, and Taylor's going to be joining me. It'll be on the August 19th last year. This is an old graphic. And this is the Twitch channel. And post that online. And when you're posting it online, I'm going to ask you a favor. Please, please always remember to set an alt text. Accessibility is super important for this sort of thing. So how to make these graphics. Now, I'm not a designer myself. This looks really cool, but I couldn't make that myself out of, say, I don't know, a paint program or something. I have very poor design skills. So with some help from colleagues and the helpful tools out there, I've got some suggestions for how to make your own graphics for stream announcements. For example, you can use something like Canva, which is such a cool tool. It makes me feel like I can actually make assets. It's super cool. They have a free tier, so you can try it out. Super, super cool. Highly recommended. Another thing you can do, and honestly, I cannot believe this didn't occur to me. A friend of mine suggested this to me. Use Google Slides. By the way, I'm presenting to you through Google Slides. The versatility of these tools is incredible. My colleague Noreen recommended to this. Why not just make slides, export those as JPEGs, and use those as announcement graphics? They've got their nice little tools for aligning stuff. You can edit the text and make them reusable. For example, what you see here is the announcement graphic for when I was doing Python for the project Shopyo with Abdur Rahman, which was very, very fun. Let's talk about time zone inclusivity. Excuse me. Yeah, let's talk about time zone inclusivity, because if you're live streaming and you're reaching all corners of the earth. It's very important to bear in mind that making an announcement that says, hey, we're going live at 4. For what? 4 p.m., 4 a.m., Central European time, Eastern time, Pacific time, Japanese summertime. What you can do is leverage existing tools to be able to say, hey, here's a link. And I'm going to show you an example of a tool here. I highly recommend this. This is called everytimezone.com. And what it does is you use this slider here, as you can see in this screenshot, and just say, hey, make me a link for this time. And then you post that link out. And then folks who open that link will be given the time according to their time zone and be like, hey, this event is going to start at 4 p.m. your time, which is really handy. I highly recommend whenever you post online that you're going to be doing some live streaming at a certain time, throw one of these out. Super helpful. Let's talk about streaming tools. I've explored 2 of them that I want to showcase to you today. Now, one of them is, especially when you want to have folks on, show of hands. Have folks heard of OBS? Okay. Oh, everybody. Okay, a couple have, a couple haven't. I'll explain it shortly. It's short for Open Broadcasting Software, I believe. It's open source. It's open source and allows you to do things like connect to Twitch, connect to YouTube, connect to whichever destination, and do live streaming. It's also cool for doing video recordings, by the way, which I'm currently doing of this talk. Fun fact. Yeah, it's super cool. It lets you lay out stuff so you can have it. And I guess we're all familiar with Zoom, especially after the pandemic, a tool for being able to do video conferencing online. So why not combine the two? So here we are. I've made a little layout. I'm not a super designer, but it's fine. So plug in a run-of-the-mill Zoom chat so that your guest can come on and just talk to you as if they were talking to you through Zoom, and you just export that all through OBS into the internet. It's super, super handy. Of course, this is running on your computer. So what if you wanted to run it on the web? Now, these tools that I've mentioned so far are all relatively free, depending on which tier of Zoom you use. But let's talk about StreamYard as well, because that's an interesting alternative as well. StreamYard is very similar to Zoom in that, to OBS in that you can stream to a destination, except that it's got a couple more bells and whistles that I find really interesting. First off, it's all on the cloud. So you open a browser. I know I look very sad in this photo, but I'm actually having a good time. So what you've got here is the ability to bring on guests, manage the layout. I love the feature of highlighting comments. I think it's so helpful. You can do things like design your branding, put up slides, put up videos, share your screen, have different layouts. These are called scenes in OBS for different layouts of stuff and how this can look. And this can be really, really handy, but it's not free. So it's got a paid tier. There's like a free tier as well where it shows the StreamYard logo. So your mileage may vary on depending on what you want to have. And the reason I'm showcasing these two is because I really want to show how important it is to bear in mind what's cost effective and what's worth working on manually. Because, for example, with OBS, as you can see this little comparison here, OBS runs locally on your PC. So if your PC breaks, you're kind of out of luck, right? All of your scenes are gone, all of that is gone. Whereas if you're running stuff on StreamYard, everything's in the cloud. So if your PC breaks, you can just quickly open up, I don't know, a tablet or a laptop or something and continue streaming from there. It's not the end of the world. Screen sharing is a little bit more tricky. You need to manually set up your windows or, use it through Zoom, which can be a little bit wonky at times, where StreamYard makes that super straightforward. When it comes to customizability, OBS gives you the ability to lay out your scenes however you like. You can have all of these plugins. You can, have the little animations when somebody subscribes to your Twitch channel that a little puppy shows up and goes, yay, or something, however you want to customize it. So you can thank your new subscribers or followers. And if that's something you want to have, then tools like OBS would be well suited for that. All of your assets and scenes will be on your computer as on OBS, like I mentioned before, whereas on StreamYard, it'll all be on the cloud. However, one thing that they both have in common is they don't offer automatic captioning or captioning in general out of the box. So let's talk about captioning. You might have noticed during my presentation today, I'm using Google Slides as automatic captioning, which is mostly good. It's better than nothing. I'm a big advocate for accessibility so that folks who probably think I'm talking too fast, as I do when I'm nervous and presenting, it's good to be able to have that option for folks. Have we heard of the difference between closed and open captioning? We've probably heard of closed captions, but I only last year learned about what open captions are and what the difference between them is. And I think it's interesting. I'd love to share it with you today. So yes, being able to have captions is great if you've got a stenographer, that is somebody who types as you talk and shows up captions. Of course, given budget, given timing, might not always be an option. And that's when having automatic captioning is the next big thing, which is, again, what I have here. What you can do, say, with OBS, for example, you know how I mentioned it has the ability to install plugins? OBS actually has the ability to have a plugin for, and this is open source. Again, the open source community is amazing. The ability to have your own OBS plugin that does captioning for you. And it does, I know it's called the closed captioning OBS plugin, and it actually uses the Google speech to text, the Google speech to text API, which is fascinating. I know it's called the closed captioning one, but it's actually for both open and closed caption. So let's talk about the difference between the two. What you see here is a screenshot of me doing some live coding for CodeC with open captions, which, by the way, is what you see here in this presentation. Open captions are captions that are embedded into the video by default. You see this in like old films that have captions in them, right? This is what open captions are. And you can see that I've set up a special text box in OBS that allows me to just say, hey, any of my captions, put them in there. It's fine. But what about closed captions? Now, closed captions, and again, OBS can do this as well, pipes those captions over to Twitch. And then you can tell your users, hey, you know, if you want to see captions, they are showing up if you click on the closed captioning button. I think it's something like here. It depends on the platform. I think YouTube offers those as well, but you need to have something like 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, which I do not have. Cool. So that's how captions work. And you'll notice they're big, they're prevalent, and they're important for being able to, you know, make sure folks can see. So let's talk about making sure folks can see what you're doing, because I think it's important to talk about font sizes. A lot of the time when we're presenting stuff, and we've often been asked like, oh, could you zoom in a little bit? We've all been there. I think it's really important to spend some time on this, because being able to see big pieces of text, like say this piece of text, look at that piece of text. I wonder what it is. Anyway, let's talk about big pieces of text and how important it is to be able to read and follow those pieces of text. Because here I am with my window live coding, and you'll see the text is quite small, isn't it? It's, you know, I see some TypeScript, I see some Vue.js, and it's really important. And I do this in every live stream I ever do. I always stop and I say, hey folks, in the chat, is the font size okay? Would you like me to make it bigger? And more often than not, by default, I'll just bump it up a couple notches just in case. You can see it's a lot more legible now. It's really important and might sound obvious, but I think it's important to bear that in mind as you go in. Let's talk also about background music. Now, your mileage may vary. You might have different preferences. Some folks will sometimes be like, hey, you know what? I would rather not have background music while watching someone code, or maybe they want to watch something else in the background, have their own music. In my personal live streams, I like to put on a little bit of lo-fi beats to code to, something like that. But then the question of copyright comes in. How do we deal with copyright-free music, especially as algorithms are getting more and more intelligent at spotting those things live, and Twitch will suspend the audio of your stream if they detect that copyrighted material is being played. Thankfully, there exists a plethora of materials and communities for creating open source materials, or what's it called? Oh my goodness, I forgot the term. CC. I'm sorry, I I forgot the term. Well, it's copyright free is what I'm getting at. Copyright free material. Nope, I'm not going to try and think about it because it's going to interrupt my presentation and I don't want to bore you all with me thinking. Anyway, yeah, copyright free materials. And I'm going to recommend an app to you. And that app is called Pretzel. Pretzel.rocks is the URL. And this is copyright free. Is it there? Twitch and YouTube Safe Music. It's gonna bother me and it's gonna completely interrupt my presentation. I apologize. Yes, having copyright-free music is really important, and being able to do so in a way that plugs directly into your OBS is really, really handy. Actually, in between me making this presentation, StreamYard recently added their own, actually made by the StreamYard team, live music into their app, so you can just have whichever genre of background music you like. It's an option. So speaking of Twitch, let's talk about follower notifications, because this is one thing that I learned the hard way as well. If you've got specific shows and people are following you on Twitch, when you start streaming, Twitch will automatically start sending out notifications and emails to folks telling them like, hey, Ramón is on, come watch him do X, Y, or Z live on Twitch. And this takes some time to propagate. It can take some time for folks to be like, Ramón is on. Let's let me sit down. Let me get a warm tea or something. So I find it's really helpful. And here's a piece of advice: to spend some time at the beginning of your stream with just a little notice that says, "Hey, we're starting soon. Go get something warm. Go get a snack," and just let folks gently come in. I usually do it for about 5 minutes before the show starts. Just gently let folks come in, settle down. Kind of like for a conference talk, kind of like we're doing here, right? And then get started. I think this is really important. And it also lets folks, not miss out. So got a couple more for you today. One piece of advice that I'm going to throw out is chat moderation. Especially as your channel grows, you're going to be confronted with spammers and scammers, just throwing in either inappropriate or unsafe links. So it's possible to have automatic Twitch tools that help with that, but if you've got teammates, if you've got somebody helping you out, it's really important to say like, hey, could you just watch the chat for me? And it lets you focus on the code. Then they can bring up questions and help you out with that. And having that moderation helps you grow a happy, safe community. And let's talk about that community, because I think it's one of the most important things to do as a member of a community is to be considerate of your chat, to be considerate of your chatters. And a couple of things that I found really important. I don't know if any of you all have done some live streaming. Sometimes you'll recognize a username that's a friend, somebody you know in real life, and it's really tempting to be like, hey, buddy, and use their real name. How's it going? Good to see you. I think it's important to bear in mind that maybe that person is using that username for themselves and don't want to be publicly mentioned like that. So read out their usernames. Again, this sounds obvious, but it's important to bear in mind. Take the time to say out their username and, let them have their anonymity. You can, on Twitch, see a list of people who are watching. I would recommend that if those people are not chatting, if they're not actively participating in the chat, don't call them out by name. Maybe they just want to lurk. If you're not familiar with lurking, it's just like watching without contributing. That's totally fine. And again, it's not nice to suddenly be watching something in the background and suddenly they go like, oh, hey, Ramón, there you are. How's it going? And you're like, hold on, I was just lurking. Like, I'm not around. Super important to do that. And a final one, just to be on the safe side, just to be inclusive, it's important. I would recommend using gender neutral pronouns when referring to folks. Again, just helps build a safe, inclusive community. Okay, so we have spent a lot of time going through things like theming, scheduling, announcements, time zones, streaming platforms, font sizes, background music, notifications, moderation, captioning, chatter safety, and chat moderation. It's a lot to take, but there's one more thing that I would like to provide to you today before I go. And one of those is a counterpoint. Yes, something going against what I've been talking to you for about the last half hour or so. And that is, if you don't want to do live streaming, I think it's really important to bear in mind that you should not feel obligated to do so. Some folks feel more comfortable, for example, blogging. Some folks feel more comfortable doing things like making YouTube videos, like making high production YouTube videos. Some people just don't want to do stuff outside of work or inside of work that's in public, and that's totally fine too. So if you see lots of folks doing it, remember, hey, do you know what? That's not for me, and that's totally fine. Now, if you are interested and you might be thinking, oh gosh, but what if something messes up and I make a total fool of myself or something? Let me remind you, we're live and it's gonna happen. I'm sorry. And I'll tell that to you with a story. When I started live streaming, one of the times that I was supposed to go live at, let's say 5 p.m., at 4:45 p.m., the power in our building went out. And my mobile connectivity is really bad. And I just had to cancel the live stream. And to be perfectly honest with all of you, I was kind of panicking about it. I wasn't happy about having to do it. But in hindsight, I already forgot. I know I'm telling you the story and I didn't forget. But what I mean is that the panic, the fear, it's gone. And things happen all the time. Let me give you some examples of stuff that have happened. Back in my old flat, my partner was working on something and dropped a whole bunch of stuff, and there was a loud crash. It happens. It's a little embarrassing. Don't get me wrong. My partner was okay. It's a little embarrassing to have folks being like, hey, what happened? Is everything okay? And you're like, no, everything's fine. Don't worry. It happens. Another story. I've been live streaming by myself and the doorbell has rang. And you have no option but to be like, oh, really sorry, folks. Doorbell's ringing. I'll be right back. And then you just run off. You go answer the doorbell. There's nothing you can do. You got to come back and be like, hey, sorry, everybody. Nothing you can do. It's fine. It's fine. Sometimes, oh my goodness, I have started so many live streams where I forgot to unmute myself. And 10 minutes in, somebody be like, hey, are you muted on purpose or what's going on here? And then I have to start over. It's fine. Nobody remembers that. And it happens to all of us. How many Zoom meetings have we been in where we tried to talk and we're muted? It happens. Remember, if you're doing a lot of this, it's going to be fine. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll feel doing it. That said, I think it's also important to go easy on yourself. We are human beings. We have limited energy. We have limited time. And this expresses itself differently from person to person. Don't overdo it. Now, when I do live streaming, and probably should have mentioned this at the start, I don't usually go for more than an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. There are some people who do it for 8 hours, and that's great, but that's not for me because I get tired. I've often jokingly told people that turning off the big light at the end of a live stream is kind of the equivalent of taking your shoes off after a long day of work. It's just like, I'm done now. I can, put on my comfortable trousers and just go sit on the sofa. And that's totally fine. And it's important not to let yourself burn out. I've been there and it's not fun. Now, most important of all, I want to remind you, you can do it. If you're interested in live streaming and you're like, but I'm not sure I can, you can. The great thing about live streaming is that you're not presenting the content, you're also presenting yourself. And, people catch on. If you're having fun, your viewers are going to have fun. And I really want to drive this home. Your audience wants you to succeed. Nobody comes in, well, I can't say nobody, but it's highly unlikely that you will have people come in to watch you stream who want you to fail. Non-existent. Well, folks, I've got some links here for stuff. I'll share. I think that I gave the slides to the team. Here's some links for resources for things like examples, what the scheduling looks like, a bunch of stuff that I linked in today. I hope to see you embark on your streaming journey. I think this is Such a fun activity to do, and I would highly recommend. And you know what, folks? Get in touch. Like, this is like, if you're on Twitter, send me a DM and let me know if you're doing stuff like coming in and doing some streaming. I'd love to know what this is like for you and what kind of an experience it is. And with that said, oop. And with all that said, thank you so much for watching today, and keep in touch. See you next time. Maybe you want to mute? Hello? I can hear you great. Can you hear me? You cannot. Can you hear me? Hello, test 1, 2, 3. Take your time. I mean, maybe it was me. I was muted. I'm sorry. Sorry, folks. You see, it happens. That is an excellent question, and I will answer it by correcting you, because I'm doing live streaming in English and Spanish as well. So I'm doing coding in live coding in Spanish. In fact, last week I did a series of streams where I was doing a TypeScript workshop that I had built, and just going through it's a Spanish course. And yeah, I was just doing it in Spanish, and it was totally fine. Now, not all of the tools will work, like the automatic captioning. Like, I can try. Hola, bienvenidos a mi charla. Wait, that worked pretty well, actually. Huh, I'm impressed. Never mind. Most of the tools are not going to work as well. But it's totally possible to do that and build an audience with it. In fact, so there's I don't know of any Polish streamers per se, but I bet there are many out there. Maybe somebody in the audience knows of a Polish coding streamer that they like. All fine. If you want to, absolutely. And I'm happy to support you with that. Like, let me know. Applause to you as well, folks. Thank you so much for joining in, and to the team, thank you so much for having me. I've been wanting to join you for years, and it's an honor to be able to do so. Thank you. Take care. Have a good one, everybody.